As the Grand Council session adjourned, Alina retreated to her quarters, a transparent bubble suspended among thousands of similar diplomatic residences in the station's central atrium. The hegemony's architecture was deliberately intimidating, each species housed according to their evolutionary rank, with humans placed near the outer rim where artificial gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Assessment. Alina murmured to her neural implant once privacy screens engage. Diplomatic probability models are shifting, replied the AI tucked behind her ear. 17% increase in hostility markers from Meridian representatives. Ulgorian delegate showed unexpected interest in your resource consumption remarks. Alina pressed her palm against the viewport, gazing at the glittering expanse of the station. Unlike the other diplomats who brought entourages, she had come alone. Standard procedure for human first contacts since the Proxima incident. One representative, one voice. No exploitable divisions. Her quarters communication panel chimed. An invitation from Salty, the Ulgorian delegate, requesting a private meeting in the neutral exchange. Trap probability. Alina asked her implant. 63%, but declining since yesterday. Ulgorians historically break from Meridian consensus when economic advantages present themselves. Alina smiled thinly. The hegemony's fatal flaw wasn't their technology or even their arrogance. It was their predictability. Millennium-old powers became set in their ways, seeing the same patterns everywhere. They categorized humanity as another primitive species seeking protection, never considering humans might have different objectives entirely. She authorized the meeting, then activated a subdermal transmitter, sending compressed data through fluctuating bandwidths that hegemony sensors registered as background radiation. Earth needed to know her assessment. Diplomatic solutions were becoming non-viable, despite identifying potential fractures in the hegemony's unified front. As she prepared for the meeting, Alina unlocked a hidden compartment in her ceremonial staff. Standard diplomatic equipment that the hegemony had scanned, but not recognized as technological. Inside was a nanite injector. Not a weapon, exactly. Insurance. The neutral exchange was a terraformed garden, with sections replicating environments from all member worlds. Alina waited in the Earth section, a disappointing approximation of a Pacific Northwest forest that smelled wrong in subtle ways that unsettled her. Ambassador Reyes, came the distinctive harmonic voice of the Ulgorian, its gaseous form contained within an environment suit that emitted gentle pulses of blue light. Your statements today have caught my collective's attention. Which statements specifically? Alina maintained the careful diplomacy her position required. That the hegemony needs humanity. Most species plead their value. None suggest we lack something essential. Economic data doesn't lie, Alina replied. Your expansion has stalled for 3 centuries. Resource acquisition continues while innovation declines. This pattern preceded the fall of Earth's empires too. The Ulgorians' lights shifted to a curious purple. You study collapse. We've survived several near extinctions. It makes us attentive to warning signs. Their conversation continued for an hour, the Ulgorian growing increasingly interested in humanity's perspective on hegemony vulnerabilities. As they parted, it extended a tendril toward her, an unprecedented gesture of respect from a species that considered physical proximity to lesser beings distasteful. Alina returned to her quarters feeling cautiously optimistic, only to find her security protocols had been triggered during her absence. Someone had attempted access, clumsy by human standards, but concerning given the diplomatic protections supposedly in place. She activated her final contingency and sent a priority message to Earth. Accelerate threshold protocols. Diplomatic window closing. That night, as Alina recorded her final observations, her quarters darkened unexpectedly. Emergency systems remained inactive, a station-wide failure impossible without deliberate sabotage. She didn't reach for weapons. Instead, she activated her staff, releasing the nanites into her bloodstream as the door dissolved before Meridian assassins. Protocol violation noted. she stated formally, buying precious seconds as the nanites integrated. The ambassador's person is protected under Sector 7 conventions. The lead Meridian, face obscured by a featureless mask, responded with chilling finality. Lesser species have no standing to invoke conventions. As they advanced with precision, Alina felt the nanites complete their work, recording everything through her own eyes as they attacked. Though her body would fail, her final testimony would reach Earth intact, encoded in altered DNA that hegemony scanners would read as radiation damage. Her last conscious thought was satisfaction. They had revealed themselves exactly as Earth's models predicted they would. Admiral Chen stood motionless before the memorial wall in Earth Defense Headquarters, studying the holographic projection of hegemony space. Hundreds of systems glowed across the display, pulsing with real-time data transmitted by deep-cover operatives who had been embedded for years. Agents Green and Tango have gone silent, reported Commander Okafor, sliding a data tablet across the obsidian conference table. Last transmission indicates Meridian counterintelligence sweeps have intensified in the Rigel sector. Chen nodded without turning. She had expected casualties from the moment threshold protocols activated. And our dormant networks, fully operational in 16 primary hegemony systems, strike capabilities at 92% readiness, awaiting your authorization. The Admiral finally turned from the display, her eyes reflecting the tactical overlay. The movement around the table stilled as staff officers sensed a shift in her demeanor. Chen had risen to command through the Mars Rebellion, where Earth forces faced overwhelming odds against separatist factions backed by corporate armies. Her tactical innovations had turned a hopeless defensive campaign into a decisive victory. The hegemony believes they've taken the measure of humanity by killing one diplomat, she said, her voice cutting through the hush. Their historical data suggests we'll either seek immediate revenge with a disorganized attack or submit to their dominance hierarchy. She activated a secondary display showing Meridian fleet movements. Their patterns revealed overconfidence. Defensive formations were minimal. Communication security lax. Begin Operation Silent Hand, Chen ordered. Activate our dormant assets within their communication networks first. Priority targets are navigational systems, life support redundancies, and targeting arrays. Execute over 48 hours to maintain the illusion of system failure rather than coordinated attack. Intelligence Officer Patul raised a hand. Admiral, we have an unexpected development from the Kithrine homeworld. It appears the assassination of Ambassador Rice has catalyzed local resistance movements. They're requesting contact. A thin smile crossed Chen's face. Interesting. The hegemony psychological profile of our species is fundamentally flawed. They expect individualistic revenge, a primate anger response. They've never faced a species that evolved complex social cooperation like ours. Deploy Infiltration Team Sigma to the Kithrine system, she continued. Provide them with the terraforming technology package and defensive schematics. If the Kithrine are willing to rise, we'll give them the means to survive the inevitable reprisal. The War Council adjourned with officers dispersing to their stations. Chen remained, joined by General Wade, her longtime strategist and the architect of Earth's Psychological Warfare Division. The public broadcast bought us time, Wade noted, referencing the unified declaration of war that had been transmitted across all frequencies. Meridian intelligence is focusing on our visible military assets, expecting a frontal assault. Meanwhile, our true response moves through their blind spots, Chen concluded. Has Project Lazarus reached implementation stage? Wade nodded solemnly. Sol system defenses are being repositioned as we speak. The evacuation protocols can begin whenever you give the word. Chen accessed a secure channel on her neural implant, bringing up a three-dimensional blueprint of Earth's underground arcologies, massive subterranean cities built during the climate wars, long hidden from hegemony observation. Billions of humans had already begun the migration below ground, leaving carefully maintained surface cities as elaborate decoys. Alina knew the risks, Chen said quietly, accessing the Diplomat's final transmission. She understood that her death might be necessary to reveal the hegemony's true nature and to justify what comes next. The Meridians believe they've struck a devastating blow by killing one human, Wade observed. They're about to learn what happens when they provoke 8 billion. Above them, the tactical display updated as the first wave of coordinated strikes began across hegemony space. No explosions, no declarations, just critical systems failing simultaneously across dozens of outposts. Their communications channels would soon flood with distress calls and confusion, while Hegemony Command struggled to distinguish accident from attack. Chen's expression remained impassive as reports of the first successes arrived. This was merely the opening move in a campaign planned years in advance. A contingency developed the moment humanity realized what kind of galaxy they had entered. The hegemony had ruled through technological superiority and biological intimidation for millennia. They were about to face something they had never encountered. A species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times, learning from each near extinction until survival itself became an art form. The aftermath aboard the Eternal Glory resembled a nightmare scene. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson as junior officers struggled to restore basic life support functions. 3 decks had been completely depressurized when safety interlocks failed simultaneously. The few survivors huddled in environmental suits, their communications reduced to short-range transmissions to avoid whatever had corrupted their primary systems. Ship-wide diagnostic complete, reported Sub-Commander Table, her luminescent skin dimmed to near darkness. A meridian stress response. The corruption originated in navigation subroutines, then spread through regulatory systems. It's elegant. There's no other word for it. Acting Captain Laren, thrust into command after Chloral's death, studied the isolated terminal before him. He had ordered all networked systems disconnected, reducing the mighty battle cruiser to a collection of independent modules barely communicating with each other. "Show me the infection pathway," he ordered. Tattle's fingers traced the corruption spread across the screen. It reproposed our own security algorithms against us. When defense systems detected the anomaly, their response actually accelerated the takeover. "Impossible," Laren muttered. "Our encryption is based on mathematical principles that have withstood millennia of testing." "Yet it bypassed everything, as if it had the command codes," Tavel countered. "Engineering reports similar patterns across all affected systems. Whatever did this understood our technology at a fundamental level." A junior communications officer interrupted with a trembling salute. "Sir, we've established contact with the Hegemony Command. They're reporting similar attacks across the entire defense perimeter. Outposts 7 through 19 have gone completely silent." Meanwhile, aboard Earth's orbital command station Vigilant, Major Sarah Kaminsky monitored the cascade of hegemony communications that poured through secured channels. Her team of cognitive warfare specialists had been preparing for this moment since the first human ships encountered hegemony scout vessels near Alpha Centauri. Phase 1 effectiveness at 87%, she reported to the holographic projection of Admiral Chen. Hegemony command structure is fragmenting exactly as predicted. Their hierarchical response protocols are creating information bottlenecks. Chen's projection nodded. "And the quantum intrusion packages, performing beyond expectations," Kaminsky replied, unable to hide a note of pride. The Meridians based their entire encryption system on mathematical constants they believed were universal. They never considered that quantum principles might function differently in various regions of the galaxy. A blind spot from a species that never had to question its assumptions. Chen observed. "What about civilian casualties?" Kaminsky brought up a detailed casualty report. "Minimal. The targeting algorithms prioritized systems with evacuation options. We estimate 98% of affected personnel survived, though many are now trapped in emergency shelters." "Good. We're fighting the hegemony's leadership, not its people's," Chen reminded her. "Admiral Vezin and his command structure are legitimate targets. Regular crew members aren't." This ethical framework had been controversial during war planning. Some military advisors had argued for maximum damage, but Chen had insisted humanity would not mirror the enemy's disregard for life. It wasn't just moral positioning, it was strategic. Each survivor would report that humans could have killed them but chose not to, planting seeds of doubt about hegemony propaganda. Across hegemony space, the pattern repeated with methodical precision. Security systems turned against their operators. Environmental controls shifted subtly, inducing confusion without causing permanent harm. Navigation satellites transmitted micro-adjustments that sent ships fractionally off course, creating cascading logistical failures. No human vessels appeared on sensors. No ultimatums were broadcast. While hegemony commanders waited for conventional military movement, human tacticians had rendered the concept of frontlines obsolete. On the Meridian homeworld, Lord Vazen received the growing list of systems failures with increasing rage. How are they doing this? He demanded of his senior intelligence director. The intelligence officer hesitated before responding. Analysis suggests they're exploiting our technological consistency. We've standardized systems across the hegemony for efficiency, but that standardization is now a vulnerability. Vazen finished, his bioluminescent markings flashing with anger. Dispatch technicians to isolate critical defense networks from the grid, and send a punitive fleet to Earth immediately. We'll show these primitives the cost of their insolence. The intelligence director remained silent, unwilling to point out what the latest reports suggested. Earth had been preparing for this conflict long before their diplomat arrived. The supposedly primitive humans had studied hegemony technology for weaknesses while presenting a facade of technological inferiority. The Meridians had spent millennia conquering through overwhelming force. They were unprepared for an enemy that struck where force was irrelevant. In the subterranean council chambers of Kithrine Prime, Captain Rivera knelt before the seventh matriarch, his posture carefully studied to convey respect without submission. The chamber walls pulsed with bioluminescent fungi that responded to the pheromonal emissions of the gathered Kithrine leaders, a living record of their emotional state that even other species could interpret with training. Currently, the walls glowed with conflicting patterns, hope mingled with deep suspicion. "Your offer seems generous," chittered the seventh matriarch, her mandibles clicking in the specific rhythm that indicated formal diplomatic address. "Too generous. The hegemony taught us the cost of accepting gifts from spacefaring powers." Rivera nodded, allowing a moment of silence before responding. A Kithrine conversational courtesy rarely honored by other species. "Earth was once like Kithrine Prime," he finally said, activating a holographic display from his wrist unit. 3 centuries ago, our planet faced ecological collapse from resource extraction. These are images from that time. The holograms showed barren landscapes, acidified oceans, collapsed ecosystems, scenes eerily similar to the Kithrine homeworld's current state. The matriarch's antennae twitched in synchronized recognition. "This is how we looked after we nearly destroyed ourselves," Rivera continued, transitioning to images of Earth's restored ecosystems. "And this is Earth now. We developed this technology not for conquest, but survival." The 15th matriarch, known for her scientific acumen, stepped forward. "Your resurrection methods would work on our world. The geological composition is different. We've adapted the processes based on soil samples gathered over the past year." Rivera replied, revealing that human scientists had been studying Kithrine Prime longer than the insectoids realized. "The terraforming packages are already calibrated for your biosphere." A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber, expressed through pheromonal signatures that made the wall fungi flash momentarily. "You prepared all this before arriving," observed the first matriarch, the eldest present, "before your diplomat was killed." Rivera met her compound eye steadily. "We believed peaceful coexistence with the hegemony was possible, but prepared for alternatives. Ambassador Reyes hoped her mission would succeed, but Earth planning accounts for all scenarios." The implication wasn't lost on the Kithrine leadership. Humans had anticipated hegemony treachery and prepared accordingly, suggesting a level of strategic foresight the matriarchs had not attributed to such a young species. "Show us these terraforming methods," demanded the scientific matriarch. Rivera activated a second hologram displaying the edge of the sacred hive grounds where his shuttle had landed. A team of human technicians worked alongside curious Kithrine workers, deploying what appeared to be crystalline structures into the barren soil. As they watched, the crystals pulsed with a soft blue light, extending microscopic filaments into the surrounding earth. The real-time sensors showed rapid neutralization of toxic compounds and the integration of engineered microorganisms that could process the hegemony's industrial waste. "The first demonstration zone will show visible results within days," Rivera explained. "Full ecosystem recovery for that region within months." The chamber erupted in multilayered communication, clicked mandibles, pheromonal releases, and antenna movements, creating a complex debate that human translators could only partially interpret. Rivera waited patiently, having been briefed on Kithrine deliberative processes. Finally, the seventh matriarch raised all four primary limbs, the gesture of preliminary agreement. "We will observe these terraforming results," she announced. "If they function as promised, we will discuss military cooperation against our common enemy." "That's all we ask," Rivera responded with careful neutrality, though internally he knew this was a decisive moment. Earth's strategists had identified the Kithrine as key to any successful alliance. Their population numbered in the trillions across mining colonies, giving them significant but untapped industrial potential. As Rivera departed the council chambers, his neural implant recorded everything for transmission back to Admiral Chen. Outside, in what had once been fertile agricultural zones, the first terraforming stations continued their work, each one simultaneously healing the planet and demonstrating to the Kithrine what life after hegemony rule could mean. The Kithrine workers assigned to observe the human technology had already begun adapting the designs, their natural engineering aptitude allowing them to grasp principles that had taken humans decades to develop. Rivera noted this with approval. Earth didn't need servants in this war. They needed partners who could innovate independently. When the hegemony fleet eventually arrived, as human intelligence suggested they would, the Kithrine would need to defend their world with minimal human support. Earth's strategy depended on it. Not one heroic last stand, but thousands of simultaneous uprisings that would stretch hegemony resources beyond breaking point. Within the Starhammer's central command spire, Lord Vezin stared at the holographic representation of Earth's apparently abandoned orbital infrastructure. The massive weapon platform had decelerated at the system's edge, its sensors sweeping methodically through the planetary bodies. "Magnify that sector," he ordered, indicating a cluster of satellites orbiting Earth that showed minimal power signatures. Those communication arrays appear functional but dormant. His senior tactician, Nivar, adjusted the display. "Analysis suggests automated systems only, my lord. No life signs detected on any orbital station. Ground scans show powered structures but minimal thermal signatures consistent with habitation." Vezin's bioluminescent patterns shifted to the deep crimson of suspicion. He had climbed to leadership through cunning rather than martial prowess, developing the sensitivity to deception that had served him well during the hegemony's internal power struggles. "The humans have a saying," he mused, recalling intelligence briefings. "Too good to be true. They anticipate our arrival yet leave their homeworld seemingly defenseless. Impossible." "Perhaps they fled to their colonies," suggested another officer. "Gamma scouts report increased activity in the Alpha Centauri settlements." Vezin dismissed this with a gesture. "No species abandons its cradle world without a fight. The humans are here, hidden, waiting. Advance with maximum sensor coverage. Deploy graviton probes to the Lagrange points and asteroid clusters." The Starhammer continued its cautious approach, now surrounded by a cloud of automated sensor drones that probed the seemingly empty space ahead. As they passed Mars, Long-range scans detected minor anomalies in the planet's magnetic field. There, Vezin indicated, focus scanning arrays on the Martian polar regions. Before his orders could be implemented, sensor alarms blared across the command deck. The Martian surface was transforming, what had appeared to be natural topography rising up to reveal artificial structures buried beneath regolith. Thousands of platforms, previously indistinguishable from the landscape, activated simultaneously. Evasive action, Vezin commanded, but the Starhammer's massive bulk made rapid maneuvering impossible. The first wave of Martian defense platforms fired not conventional weapons, but gravitational disruptors. Devices that created localized distortions in spacetime, throwing the hegemony targeting systems into chaos. Below the command deck, in the Starhammer's cavernous main engineering section, Chief Engineer Krell noticed something peculiar about the human attack pattern. The disruptor impacts, while visually spectacular, were causing minimal actual damage to the station's critical systems. "They're testing our shield harmonics," he realized suddenly. "These aren't their primary weapons. They're calibrating for something else." He attempted to communicate this to command, but the gravitational distortions had created communications dead zones throughout the station. By the time his warning could reach Vezin, the true nature of humanity's defense strategy was becoming clear. The Jupiter defense grid activated next, not as a direct assault, but as a massive sensor jamming network that blinded the hegemony fleet to what was happening on the far side of the system. Aboard her stealth command vessel hidden in Saturn's rings, Admiral Chen monitored the unfolding battle alongside her tactical staff. The holographic battle map showed the Starhammer's position as a massive red icon, surrounded by the blue indicators of Earth's defensive systems. "Neptune strike forces report ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. "Stealth bombers are in final position." Chen nodded, studying the Starhammer's reaction to the initial defense layers. They're responding exactly as the behavioral models predicted. Vezin is cautious but arrogant. He'll commit to the primary weapon rather than retreat when pressed. She turned to her executive officer. "Signal all Neptune forces. Execute Operation Blindside." From hidden bases beneath Neptune's cloud layers, hundreds of stealth vessels emerged, their hulls coated with light-absorbing materials that rendered them nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. These weren't conventional warships, but specialized bombers designed for a single purpose: to damage the Starhammer's main cannon before it could target Earth. The hegemony's tactical doctrine had always prioritized overwhelming force over subtlety. The Starhammer represented this philosophy's ultimate expression, a weapon so powerful that defensive measures were considered irrelevant. This created a critical vulnerability that Chen's strategy exploited. All of the station's defensive systems were oriented outward, with minimal internal redundancy. "Neptune strike groups passing the outer sensor perimeter," reported the tactical officer. "No detection signatures from hegemony systems." Chen's expression remained impassive, but her hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the edge of the command table. Everything hinged on the next few minutes, not just the survival of Earth, but the validation of humanity's approach to warfare. Traditional hegemony doctrine would have attempted to match the Starhammer's firepower directly. A contest Earth would inevitably lose. Instead, Shen had designed a strategy that targeted the psychological and procedural weaknesses of her opponent, turning the enemy's strengths into vulnerabilities. General Marcus Wade moved through the underground command center on Titan, its walls lined with neural interface consoles, where operators sat motionless, their consciousness projected into the hegemony's communication networks. Each operator wore a specialized headset that monitored brainwave patterns, allowing them to navigate alien computer architectures through thought alone. "Status on Operation Echo," Wade asked his executive officer, Colonel Lin. "Disinformation packages deployed across all targeted hegemony command channels," Lin reported, bringing up a visualization of information flows across hegemony space. "Their command structure is fragmenting exactly as predicted. The Rigel checkpoint incident exceeded damage projections by 23%. Wade studied the data with satisfaction. The Rigel incident, where 3 hegemony battle groups had fired on each other due to falsified identification signals, represented a new phase in the war. The hegemony's responses were becoming increasingly predictable as panic spread through their ranks. And our cognitive warfare specialists. Lin guided him to a separate section of the command center where a team of neuropsychologists monitored real-time data from implanted agents. The targeted electromagnetic pulses are producing the expected neurological effects in Meridian command staff. Their decision-making is showing increased aggression and decreased analytical capacity. This was perhaps the most controversial aspect of Wade's strategy. Earth's understanding of Meridian brain structure had allowed for the development of non-lethal weapons that specifically affected the species' decision-making centers. The pulses didn't control minds, but subtly influenced emotional states, pushing already aggressive commanders toward recklessness. Dr. Nkosu reports completion of the gravity manipulation integration. Lin continued, referencing the chief scientist's breakthrough. The first vessels equipped with distortion generators are ready for deployment. Wade nodded, making his way to a secure communication chamber. There, he connected to a quantum-encrypted channel linked directly to Earth's underground command bunkers. Operation Phoenix is proceeding on schedule, he reported to the waiting Security Council members. Hegemony intelligence still believes Earth was rendered uninhabitable by the Starhammer's death throes. They're focusing their search efforts on our colonial holdings. The council chair, a former diplomat named Takahashi, leaned forward in the holographic projection. And the psychological impact of Admiral Chen's sacrifice. Immeasurable, Wade replied. Our intelligence networks report that resistance movements have emerged on 17 previously docile worlds. The hegemony's narrative, that humanity has been defeated, is undermined by continued attacks they can't explain. This was the beating heart of Wade's strategy. Perceived victory had made the hegemony vulnerable. With their attention fixed on hunting for surviving human military forces, they overlooked the real threat. Thousands of small, coordinated actions designed not to destroy their military directly but to collapse their ability to function as a unified force. The meeting concluded with approval for the next phase of operations. Wade returned to the command center's strategic planning section, where a 3-dimensional model of hegemony space glowed with thousands of potential targets. Begin Phase 3, he ordered. Activate all sleeper cells in sectors 7 through 13. Priority targets are communication relays, supply depots, and leadership residences. Meanwhile, in a laboratory complex buried 2 kilometers beneath Earth's surface, Dr. Aisha Mkosi supervised the final testing of a prototype vessel equipped with the gravity manipulation technology her team had developed by reverse engineering captured hegemony drive systems. The ship, smaller than traditional military vessels but packed with experimental technology, hovered in a massive testing chamber, distorting light around itself as its engines created localized bubbles and space-time. Full power test, Nkosi ordered, her voice steady despite the historical significance of the moment. Prepare for controlled spatial jump. The vessel's drive core pulsed with blue-white energy. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship simply vanished, reappearing at the chamber's opposite end without crossing the intervening space. Jump successful, reported her chief engineer, voice thick with emotion. Spatial coordinates maintained with 99.8% accuracy. Nkosi allowed herself a brief smile. The technology wasn't just a weapon. It represented a fundamental leap in humanity's understanding of physics. The hegemony had possessed similar capabilities for millennia, but had stagnated, using established technologies without truly exploring their potential. Human scientists, driven by necessity and unburdened by the hegemony's rigid thinking, had taken the principles and pushed them in directions the Meridians had never considered. What had begun as military research would eventually transform humanity's relationship with space itself. Prepare the specifications for mass production, Nkosi instructed. General Wade needs a fleet of these vessels within the month. With this technology, Human ships could appear anywhere in hegemony space without warning, rendering their defensive perimeters and early warning systems obsolete. The psychological impact would be as devastating as the military applications. And fear, as Wade's strategy recognized, was ultimately more powerful than any weapon. Commander Sophia Rice felt the quantum tunneling device activate, the specialized field enveloping her strike team, as reality blurred around them. The sensation lasted only microseconds, but left behind the distinctive metallic taste that all quantum jumpers experienced, the human brain's interpretation of passing briefly outside normal spacetime. When reality solidified, they stood within a crystalline chamber deep inside the Imperial Citadel on Luminara. The Meridian homeworld had never been breached by outsiders in recorded history. Until now. "Security systems neutralized," whispered Kivex, the Lithian specialist, whose crystalline body structure allowed direct interface with Meridian technology. "Internal sensors show minimal activity 3 levels above." "The archival chamber." Sophia nodded, surveying her strike team. Each member had been selected for specific biological or technological advantages. Niray operatives, whose amphibious biology made them immune to Meridian chemical defenses. Kithrine engineers who could navigate the vertical architecture designed to disadvantage oxygen breathers. Humans whose neural adaptability allowed them to process information faster than any hegemony security protocol. "This isn't just a military operation," Sophia reminded them, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is an archaeological expedition. We're here to uncover the truth they've buried." The team moved through the Citadel's empty corridors like shadows, encountering none of the resistance they had prepared for. Occasionally, they passed the bodies of Meridian officials, not killed in combat, but by what appeared to be internal power struggles. "These wounds were inflicted by Meridian weapons," observed Talon, their Kithrine security specialist. "The marks indicate ceremonial execution blades. The hegemony is consuming itself," Sophia noted, just as Earth's psychological warfare models predicted. When they reached the sealed entrance to the archival chamber, they encountered their first real obstacle. A massive door of unknown alloy, its surface inscribed with genetic locks that would respond only to pure Meridian DNA. "This is where I contribute," said Dr. Eliza Chen, the team's xenogeneticist and Admiral Chen's niece. She removed a specialized device from her pack, a genetic synthesizer loaded with samples collected from Meridian casualties throughout the war. "The lock requires living tissue with specific genetic markers," she explained, programming the synthesizer. "We can't replicate a living Meridian, but we can create tissue with the markers their security system recognizes." The synthesizer hummed, generating a small sample of luminescent tissue that pulsed with the distinctive rhythm of Meridian cellular structures. When pressed against the door's sensor panel, the massive barrier silently receded. The chamber beyond exceeded their intelligence briefings. Instead of traditional archives, they found row upon row of stasis pods, thousands of them, each containing what appeared to be sleeping Meridians. But closer inspection revealed disturbing modifications, hybrid anatomical features from dozens of species incorporated into Meridian genetic structures. "This is extensive," Dr. Chen whispered, scanning the nearest pod. They'd been conducting genetic integration experiments for thousands of years. Sophia moved to a central control node where Kivex was already interfacing with the system. The Lithian's crystalline form pulsed with data as he accessed the archive's records. "I found the Elena Reyes file," he announced grimly. "They didn't just kill her, they harvested her. Complete genetic sequencing, neural mapping, even personality matrix extraction." Sophia's expression remained controlled, though her vital signs spiked on the team's shared monitoring system. She had prepared for this possibility, but confirmation of her mother's final indignity still struck deep. "What were they planning to do with the data?" she asked, her voice clinical. "Integration," Kivex replied. "Human diplomatic skills combined with Meridian longevity. They were creating a specialized diplomatic hybrid caste." As the team pushed deeper into the facility, they discovered the true extent of the archivist's work. Not just genetic samples, but complete biological records of every species the hegemony had encountered, organized not by scientific interest, but strategic value. This isn't research, Dr. Chen realized. It's weaponization. They'd been systematically identifying advantageous traits for military applications. At the chamber's heart, they found what their intelligence had only hinted at: the genitarium, a vast spherical room where the senior archivists worked. Unlike the political leaders who served as the hegemony's public face, these ancient meridians had remained hidden for millennia, guiding their species' evolution from the shadows. Life signs ahead, warned Talon. Multiple meridians, different biological signatures than standard patterns. Sophia signaled the team to defensive positions as the inner door opened to reveal 7 figures unlike any meridian encountered before. Taller, their skin patterns more complex, eyes adapted for different light spectrums. These were the true rulers of the hegemony. "You should not be here," stated the central figure, its voice containing harmonic patterns that triggered an instinctive sense of submission in the team members, a biological weapon embedded in their very speech. "But since you are, you may witness the culmination of our work." The archivist gestured to a series of development chambers, where partially formed bodies floated in nutrient solution. Even incomplete, their hybrid nature was evident. Meridian-based structure with distinctly human neural architecture and sensory organs. "The next phase of our evolution," the archivist announced with cold pride. "Your species' adaptability with our technological advancement. The perfect synthesis."